or what they call the March 23rd movement, seems to be being a sore thumb in that country. A lot of contradictions, a lot of finger pointing. Once the fingers were pointed to Uganda and Rwanda, but predominantly now they have been pointed to Rwanda. Burundi also pointing fingers there, but the West coming out to put their foot down and say Rwanda had better stop supporting M23. France has come out today, the US has been out, the European Union has also been out there to be able to say what should be happening in that country. The East African force left, SADC came in December, and their tenure runs out this December. The biggest question is, can this implode to become a regional conflict? Can we be able to see the repercussions in the different countries, especially if we look at Uganda and how much business we take to DRC, about $56 million in the last report that has come out on the trade that is happening between us and the country there. But when we look at Sake and Goma, 25 kilometers between, and M23 taking over one dominant area, and all of us on tenterhooks wondering what could happen. That's the discussion tonight, to be able to put perspective to that, but also how to tame that war and bring peace in that country. Let me introduce the panel. On my extreme left, General Felix Kulaije, now formerly defense spokesperson, now public information officer of the UPDF. Good evening, sir.
Defense public information officer.
We're going to get used to that. It will take some time. Hey,
so it's DPIO.
Yeah. You're welcome, sir, and good evening.
Thank you, Timothy, and good evening, dear viewers.
Next to him, Dr. Sarah Birete, the Executive Director for Center for Constitutional Governance. Good evening.
Today she wanted to look like the military.
That's why we put the blend closer to you. Good evening, Dr.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers. Glad to be back.
It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Next to her is Counsel Edgar Tabaro, who is a lawyer but also an expert on regional matters. Good evening, and it's good to have you, Counsel.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure being with. I used to call him Big Brother, but evidently it's him who has to call me Big Brother now, General Kulaije. But just a quick correction. Sake has not fallen to the M23.
But on the road to it, the 25 kilometers there?
There are many issues that are happening behind the scenes. But anyway, let's carry on.
Let's carry on there. He is here also in the capacity as the Vice President of the Democratic Party and also a former Yala Member of Parliament. Honorable Mbide, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Timothy. Colleagues, I am extremely happy, and good evening, viewers.
She's been away 2 weeks, but she's back. Professor Sarah Sally, Dean at the School of Women and Gender Affairs at Makerere University. Good evening, Professor, and it's good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Timothy. Good evening, colleagues, and good evening, our viewers.
So you can be part of this discussion. Go to our YouTube channel, drop your comment there. Let us know what you think. Hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines or the number 0709 60 25 92. Drop your text or WhatsApp on that number. Let us know what you think. Or our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. At the top of the hour, we'll be reading some of your messages there. This conflict is one of the things that I was looking forward to discuss. So let me start with Edgar, who seems to be in contention with what is happening there. Edgar, what's really happening in this country, and why? I've had you on different forums discussing this, especially its effects on the country, but also 150 people dead, 100,000 people moving almost daily. Internally, IDPs there, and 100,000 people moving. Social services strained in the country, and this is all happening in DRC. Your thoughts on this?
I think sometimes these things are exaggerated. I don't know how much I can say on air, and given that this is a public broadcaster, and I'm also alive to the sensitivities involving one of the neighboring states. The other one, we can always handle the fallouts. So I have to be extremely careful, because you can very easily escalate some of these tensions, particularly given the vantage position that I occupy. You're asking me what exactly is happening. Let me put it this way. The area in contention, Rutshuru, Bunagana, Sake, Mweso, that's, I think, territorial Masisi. Now, it's in comparison to the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's not even 100th of the size of the DRC. DRC is 2.4 million square kilometers in size. And you've rightly said there are 103 militias in that part of the country. Of course, sometimes these things are exaggerated. Some of the militias are as small as 20, 10 people. Very, very different militias, but the dominant one happens to be the M23, Nyatura, of course FDLR, they're different Mai groups. They're different Mai groups. They're different Mai groups. They represent tribal interests, and even sometimes the clans, then sometimes hills, misos. Yeah? Then there are also those in southern Kivu, South Kivu. There is Twirwaneho, there's Gumino. Now we have those ones from Burundi, Redi Tabara and FNL. As remnants of your late friend, Nkurunziza. Those who have been displaced by the changes there. So, M23 attracts a lot of attention. One, because it's the area of operation targets Goma. Now, Goma is not your ordinary city. There are very many diverse interests, local, regional, and international. Now, Goma Airport, by the way, is busier than Entebbe Airport. And these people don't fly there for tourism. No. They don't fly to Goma for what? For tourism. And I and my big brother, General Kuraije, he's my mentor in many ways. And he's my mentor in many ways, and I've followed his progress. By the way, General Kuraije was in that part of the world working there as, I don't know whether as a pacifier or a peace enforcer or whatever it is. I don't want to raise controversies here.
Pacifier.
Well, it's always in quotation. But what is critical in these conflicts? Many events turn on information that is not available to the general public. Some of the information is of a security nature, intelligence, some of it of diplomatic nature. Now, in the world of diplomacy, it's a deep sea of secrets, fickle allies. You can walk into a meeting, persons like him who confess to be Roman Catholics, practicing Roman Catholics, and he makes a presentation and has overtures towards a certain position. As he walks out, he receives different instructions. And you will see the same Mukasambide changing positions or speaking double-mouthed. And this is exactly what is happening in that part of the world. Much of the things that are influencing, much of the premises that are influencing events there, the information is not available to the public. However, I would like to point out this from the onset, where I and General Kleege are agreed, is that the conflicts, and I think there's a time we discussed it with Professor Sally, when we're discussing the conflicts in the Sahel. The conflicts are majorly economic. Communities, local communities, first of all, there's what they call resource nationalism. Then even local communities fighting over natural resources. Then you also have the international community and regional community also interested in their natural resources. And in the case of the DRC, it's minerals. Now, when you speak to experts, of so-called experts, they like to give a wrong diagnosis that it is ethnic. Now, ethnicity is only a symptom. The major cause is economic. And unless and until we address that root cause of the problem, all these others will be engaged in semantics, and every attempt at reaching a resolution of these conflicts will be a futile, it will be an exercise in futility. The same problems will emerge, as indeed you've seen M23 had been inactive for 10 years. Now, because there are resources that different actors have to access, then the Army 23 emerged. In relation to that, Uganda had rolled its earth movers, the earth moving equipment, to start construction of the Rushuru, rather Bunagana Rushuru, rather it's actually Bunagana Goma with a spur to what? Rushuru. And the same company, Ugandan company, was given a concession to construct a toll road between Goma and Kisangani. Now, in the construct of things, that road is basically a bypass road. It's a bypass road, and believe me, that's what is defining, that's the major source of the tensions.
Okay. Allow me bring in Honorable Mbide, having sat both at the East African Parliament there and had some of these members of Parliament. Council Edgar puts it that minerals are at the center of this all. When you look at the finger pointing coming from DRC, looking at President Kagame also speaking, but also getting reliable information that in the next few days or weeks, the two could be meeting just like they did in Addis Ababa. When you look at this conflict that is bringing in the region, international players, what do you make of it?
First of all, of course, for me, I would associate myself with the reasoning of my brother here, to the extent that I consider the point of the economic point covered as point number one. It is going to be very unlikely. If we want to dissect this problem properly, you are going to give it its historicity, that is number one. Then you create also a dichotomy of actors. There are continental actors and extracontinental actors. Now, the extracontinental are majorly economic. The continental actors have got a lot of aspirations that have got everything to do with defense, self-defense in most cases. Then obviously they also have the economic, of course, interests, and one would do actually, it would be foolhardy for anybody to imagine that there is nothing economic in the circumstances. Why else would we form an East African community bloc if we had no economic interest? That definitely cross-cuts extraterritorial interests. But historically, we are looking at, of course, this major problem. Being economic, I would also understand it in a sense that historically the economists, the international economists really came and started now dissecting our own areas and regions into borders, thereby creating citizenry that we are now also again a dichotomy of two. There are those that were affected by the boundaries that quickly divided families into several countries. You divide a similar family into several countries, and obviously that means that that family is divided into two countries. Here in Uganda, we had a family that had a vice president in Kenya and a minister in Uganda, and the effect was a boundary. But then, there are also those that were a function of cross-cutting movements of factors of production, and majorly labor. Now, when you look at those that actually moved, and of course the fights that ensued by Africans that wanted independence, it meant that all of those that had been deposited in areas also by independence became citizens of those areas. Now, what again happened? Because when you look at the problems, the ethnic problems in Congo, DRC, some of them started by militia, by several militias generated by ethnic concoctions that are established. When you look at the Mai Mai, we look at the historicity of all of those that attacked each other. Now, There are those that focused on Tutsis. There are all those that focused on the Hutus. Then the substantive leaderships that now took power also created a lot of cataclysms in their own areas as a raw material for better leadership. How they would stay on for purposes that when you ferment disturbance, then obviously now you begin to recruit from those disturbed areas in such a way that those become makeshift bases for you to rely on to fight your own minor battles. There is also another effect. It is also becoming a logical impossibility for the Congo DRC to raise a substantive, better army even with the help that is there. And it is just, some of these are also based on corruption. But then, now the kind of politics that was introduced to us, which meant that actually democracy is about a series of periodical elections. Now, which election is now compared to the low relative maturity of the masses, which is also a point. You have now to make sure you do gallery politics and announcements. Now, several leaders, successful leaders, because when I can say, there are certain militias that grew out of, for example, the father of Shekedi. While Mobutu wanted to dismiss him from prime ministership or ministership intermittently, it would also raise upheavals on the ground to the extent that those developed into also minor militias that my brother has been talking about. Then, what do we have to do? Now, statements made by leaders, because when you look at killings and of course addresses, there are certain governors in the 90s that would make statements to the extent that then those that had been declared citizens, having their forces to go from Rwanda in 1925, and those whose citizenship, whether Tutsi or Hutu, but of course Kinyarwanda speaking people, were by means of a demarcation of the border, the same kind of situation we have got here in Uganda. They had been declared citizens at successive enactments of constitutions. And I think in 1960, which was again confirmed 1967, and also in Congo.
No, 1973.
73 was a further confirmation by Mobutu. But then in 1960, it had also been occasioned that they are citizens. Now, when governments continue, but then again Parliament passes a law which was approved but not assented to, declaring them non-citizens. So you see that when nationals begin to feel they are either citizens or non-citizens, they begin also to think that actually war must break out to resolve such a contradiction. So the problems in Eastern Congo can be resolved, but one must study, just like my brother is saying, you must study them, but you must break them into the historicity, the current, the economics, the ethnics, even the gender. When you think, because it is also a problem. Now, rape is definitely subjected then.
Rape has been weaponized.
Weaponized completely. So there is the problem. Now we get to the region. There are militias that are actually using the Congo because of its less management now of some of the expanses of the regions. There are those that are using it as a fertile recruitment ground for garrisons that are also mapping up to solve their own issues that they have wherever they came from. Now, if that also is not curtailed, countries neighboring that Congo will not begin thinking that actually in the defense of their own aspirations, there must be some curtailment of some sort. That also has punctuated, of course, the absence of peace in Eastern DRC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbide. Professor, when you hear both...
On this occasion, Honorable Mbide has been very diplomatic. I don't know whether it's in reference to the diplomacy I was talking about in my submission.
When you hear Edgar and Honorable Mbide...
Now, Edgar, why are you attacking me?
When you hear about the economics there, but the East African force was there. SADC came in December there. But this seems to be fresh fighting that is happening and lives that are at stake. He has talked about rape. I just saw a story of a few women that when they go to pick firewood and come back, what happens in that forest is a whole different story. The humanitarian situation in this place. As a social scientist, when you look at this conflict, it is at what cost?
Thank you very much, Timothy. The cost of this conflict is very, very high. First and foremost, I liked what Honorable Mbide said about looking at the historicity of things. The violence in the Congo does not start now. The violence in the Congo can be traced back to actually the colonial era. where actually communities were turned onto each other to generate the rubber quarters, okay? Where, I mean, you can go do a quick Google search where the DRC, I think under the time of King Leopold, lost between 1.5 to 13 million people, where the Force Publique, which was supposed to be the African sentries that worked on behalf of the Belgians, were given free rein to, first of all, kidnap women and children.
It was
force
an enforcer of the colonial regime.
Force the men to produce rubber quarters, and if the men did not produce rubber quarters, then they had their hands cut off. And then time reached when people could not raise enough rubber quarters, and yet the Force Publique wanted to show the Belgians that they were working very hard. They would actually just chop off the hands and take, okay? And of course, there are other horrendous stories of men who have tried to resist even having their children butchered and eaten and then sent to the remains if they were in prison. So the violence in the DRC is very much entrenched within the economics of the DRC. So the colleagues are right. Rubber was because rubber was required. It was discovered. Then people suddenly realized it has very wonderful things, including creating tires for big vehicles. So DRC had to produce the rubber at the time. But fast forward, you have this violence entrenched. So beyond rubber, they discover the oil, they discover the cobalt, they discover the gold, they discover so many things. And it looks like the script of how to deal with the ethnic people has not changed. Congo has what everybody in the world wants. But
including lithium now.
Yes, including lithium, cobalt, and all those kinds of things. But the strategy of accessing those things seems to have remained as bad as when King Leopold ruled the Congo. And then this, of course, reminds me of Frantz Fanon's book, The Wretched of the Earth. Some commentators say that the Wretched of the Earth was actually inspired by the Congo crisis after independence, where actually Frantz Fanon elaborates on the dehumanizing nature of colonialism, that the naked violence is carried on even when states get independence. So those who take over the states internalize the violence of the colonizer, and they don't seek to end it. It becomes the modus operandi of dealing with populations. And the DRC has continued with this kind of naked violence. But as colleagues have said, at the base of all these things is exploitation of natural resources, where as a post-colonial, the place is seen as a place of just extraction, not development. So it remains underdeveloped so as to create these kinds of things. And you asked me about the social cost of these things. Of course, the social cost is high. We've seen Congolese leaving the Congo or the DRC now to these parts of the world for a very long time. From the 70s, I mean, we have lived with Congolese refugees. People who are very resourceful outside the Congo, but would have been more resourceful if they were home. You're talking about, we've talked about underdevelopment economically, lack of social services, okay? Lack of basic infrastructure, that becomes a consequence, but also there is the psychological effect. When you break up communities and you keep dispersing them, what happens to their culture? What happens to their identity? What happens to their customs? What happens to their way of life in terms of the land? Because they are permanently being thrown off. And Honorable Mbide talked about rape and intimate partner violence. But what also we need to know, and since for the last, I think, like 13 years, the concern around rape and the weaponization of rape in the DRC is that it does not only target women, it has also been weaponized heavily against men. So when you look at documentaries
Men don't talk, we are stoic.
Actually, it is even a worse story. When you look at documentaries like Patriarch Against Men by the Refugee Law Project, you have men suffering this kind of violence, reporting to the UN centers for rape, and they are told, oh, sorry, we believe what you're saying, but we are constructed to deal with rape against women. So these men then begin falling through the cracks. And when they end up as refugees in some of these parts of the world, they are a very depressed kind of refugee. Trauma, because you're even having on a social front the wife saying, rape happened to me, but I knew rape can happen to a woman. Now rape has happened to you as my husband, so what are we now? Are you still my husband? With that kind. So the social consequences and the traumatic consequences of wars actually live on beyond even after
Even
the
generations.
for generation, even when the guns falling silent is just the start. But they can live on for generations, they can live on for decades. I mean, you look at a country like Uganda and you wonder where our manners went. But I mean, there was a lot of brutality some decades ago. We are still reaping. The government is still dealing with the violence and whatever of some decades in the past.
The Idi Amin era. was
Yes, so
certainly-
once people normalize violence, once people normalize dealing with each other badly, then it is only a matter of time that violence becomes worse and worse. So what was rape against women, now we see it against men. We don't know who is going to be next. But in the whole mix of that is loss of land, loss of livelihoods, loss of ways of life, and those consequences will live on for generations.
Thank you, Professor. General Felix, having been at the center of it at some point, our army being there at some point, many players have been pulled into this place. Why is this war not coming to an end? There have been economic, but also President Tshisekedi has said no dialogue. President Kagame has come out to say, you know what, the burden of DRC is not going to be a burden. And heavy deployment by the RDF at the border. What do you make of this war as the UPDF, and are you concerned of it coming home?
I would do, for starters, I would like to bring out the identity issue. Edgar has tried to downplay it, giving resources as the prominent cause. But identity is a serious question as well. But you see, you're asking whether the war can end. Who will allow it to end?
No one.
As long as crisis exists in the DRC, the resources in DRC are cheap to exploit. Because there's nobody there's no gatekeeper. Are you getting me? And the people who have been looting Congo since 1900 are still looting it. The only difference is that there are new actors on the scene. Timothy, I walked in Ituri region on foot.
It was Oriental then.
I walked in Oriental. I can tell you, you know you are in a jungle and all of a sudden you land on an opening. It's an airport or an airstrip. In the middle of nowhere. Why? Aircrafts land to pick resources. They are not for Congolese. They are for Europeans, they are for Americans. 2, let anybody write a story Uganda has deployed on the Congo border. I will get calls from Washington, from London, from Paris, from Brussels.
Complain.
Journalists, diplomats asking me, why are we deploying on the Congo border?
And mainly economic attaches at their embassies.
Yet, as we speak, there have been skirmishes on Uganda-South Sudan border. Nobody has
And nobody is bothered about
Nobody is bothered.
Nobody has called me. I have a diplomat who has been sending me messages. I will not mention him. But on the South Sudan, Uganda border, issues are there. Nobody has called.
Even Karamoja we had.
That's very telling. So, nobody will allow Congo to settle. Particularly the old thieves.
The old what?
The old thieves. And you are talking about powerful families in the West. 2, you hear some state actors talking of Banyarwanda speakers should go home. To where? You need to listen to Mwalimu Nyerere. The video has been doing the rounds. Explaining the history. As I talk of historicity, I like Mbide's English. The historicity of this part. The word actually, that city is called Goma, but it was Ingoma. Sekinyarwanda word Ingoma. And 2, like he rightly put it, in fact, this particular part of the world has relatives in 3 countries. So where do you want to put them? So the question of identity cannot be ignored. When you go to Ituri, you have the question of the Hema versus the Lendu.
It's actually a worse conflict.
And it's a worse conflict.
It's a worse conflict than the M23. Take it
No,
from
when
me.
we were there, in one day, 1,000 people were killed in a place called Drodro. 1,000 slaughtered
Yeah.
with machetes. So the situation in DRC is uglier than we know. And so it requires a collective effort. For me, when East African community got interested and involved, I had seen this as a positive step in the right direction, that we are going to have a collective solution development by the region. Because certainly, you're asking about the effect. Trade has been affected. You're looking at, see how now our shilling has been depreciating in the last 2 months.
It's because of absence of gold.
It's
from the
absence of
DRC.
trade.
Trade. Yeah.
Absence of trade?
Yes, yes.
Or
Trade.
absence of smuggling?
No. Sarah, just let me, this is a public broadcaster. Let me just explain a little bit. Now, the DRC currency is liquid. So they use gold as a medium of exchange. As such, and you can even go and look at the Bank of Uganda figures. And let us stop this popular talk that Uganda is looting gold from the DRC. They use it as a medium of exchange. So when you look at the BOU statistics, the commodities exported to the DRC are inversely proportional to the gold that is re-exported from Uganda. And that gold is what had helped stabilize our currency. In the last 6 weeks, I mean, the shilling, the US dollar is about to hit 4,000 shillings, the highest ever in Uganda's whatever, in post-87 currency reform. So it's sorry I interrupted.
Thank you, Edgar, for that education.
Sorry.
So Timothy was elucidating that if you want to address the conflict in DRC, you cannot ignore the history. You cannot forget the cultural implications of what is going on. Leave alone now the human rights violations that are so enormous. Today, in North Kivu, your nose matters, the size of your nose. These militias you are hearing about, they are those that particularly go for a certain size of the nose. You won't survive. Whatever you want to call them, there are some non-Tutsis who don't have a big nose. Anyway, but the point is, the ethnicity is something you can't ignore.
Hate speech is prevalent.
The hate speech.
It's very prevalent.
And the campaign has really...
And the campaign has hit rooftop.
Yes, and importantly, you remember in the previous elections, you know, in that part of the world, elections were not held in 2018.
No.
So the last election they had in that part of the world was in 2011.
Yes.
Now, out of 15 deputies, 15 members of parliament from North Kivu, 11 were Kinyarwanda speaking, Rwandaphone.
Yes.
In this election, no single Kinyarwanda speaking person was voted in North Kivu and South Kivu. I mean, it's that.
And in areas predominantly, Nyarwanda speakers.
So why didn't they vote Kinyarwanda leaders?
Hate speech,
Honorable, let's allow him finish. I'm going to come back to you.
Because there was no voting, and we won't want to get into that debate.
Okay.
No, I will not go there. So the point
So it's part of the hate speech.
The point I'm making, if you are to address the issue, we must go the root causes. Number one. Number two, we must go the history. The state of DRC itself. 1960, 5 months to independence, the Belgians said to the Congolese, we are giving you independence. 5 months.
It was Lumumba's insistence. It's not the.
How many graduates did it have? 3.
3.
A country of that size, with that population, only 3 graduates.
With a sergeant.
No wonder
sergeant as the
Patrice
senior
Lumumba
responsible.
had to bring a sergeant to command the national army. Mobutu Sese Seko. And the sergeant is supposed to manage only 30 men.
Commander attack.
To manage, not even to command. Because the commander is a lieutenant. So you are giving a manager for 30 men to manage the army of the national of the whole country. No wonder they celebrated when Lumumba was captured. So, you cannot just expect solutions to emerge from nowhere. I can tell you with confidence, Bunagana Ruchu Road, when it was being constructed for the first time, my father was part of the supervisors.
His father's from Chisoro.
He was part of my own father was part of the supervisors. And today you are telling me the people in that area are foreigners to Congo. You expect the solution to come from where? So, ICRAF was there. ICRAF is found not to be useful because the mandate was different. The mandate of ICRAF was establish a political order to enable a political process. His Excellency Shekedi expected ICRAF to fight M23.
For him.
Now, since that was outside our mandate, we couldn't. So once the mandate ended on the 8th of December, we were told to pack our bags and off we came. Now, ironically, you find some Congolese elements saying Uganda is involved in that conflict. The truth of the matter is, wherever we get involved, there is a difference. I don't want to go into details, but wherever we have gotten involved, a difference is seen. Okay? So, and we are interested in a peaceful Eastern Congo for economic reasons.
General, let me ask a question. On the military front, as a country, what is our stand with M23?
For us, because we know M23 as a Congolese rebel group, we have ever mediated between the Congolese government and the M23. Honorable Crispus Chionga was chairing those peace talks in 2009. An agreement was signed between the state of Congo and M23, if you can remember. And so our stand is the solution to the problems of M23 or any other rebel group that has genuine political interests is a political process. War is only a means to an end. It can't be an end in itself. And I repeat, why do you think we took earth moving equipment to construct roads in Eastern Congo? We know the potential of that region. The financial meltdown of 2008-2009 did not affect this country for one major reason: regional trade. You have just mentioned $56 million that is no longer being earned anyway. So it would take a fool to ignore Eastern Congo, leave alone the humanitarian factor. Now, you are talking about the weaponization of rape. The dignity of every human being is having the right to say no about his or her body. But now, you are not only dehumanizing the women, you are now dehumanizing the men. The security of society. You are referring to the indiscipline here. The major cause was children seeing their fathers being beaten and fathers crying Mama Nyabu in this country. A child believes the strongest person in the world is his or her father. Now this fellow, the power Mike he knew or she knew is being made to cry Mama Nyabu. A man coming running home, Muchala Basajja Babu. You're a man and you're declaring that other men, others are the men, not you are not the man. So why are you surprised that there is no more decency in this country?
Thank you.
So the destruction of values of the Congolese society is not about resources alone. It's the absence of security and protection for the common person.
Thank you, General. Dr. Sarah, let me come to you. Identity, economics, two reasons fronted there, but mediations have been on for as long as we can remember. You can even remember the closest, Angola, and also recently in Addis Ababa. Why have these mediations failed in these countries? And are these two reasons the only reason why there's still unrest in this country?
Well, I think the panelists have talked about the history of DRC war. And so much has been written if you look at the authors of, the origins, the rise and decline of Zairean state by Crawford, Young, and Thomas, it says a lot about, of course, the journey that members have shared, but also much more recently, the nature and evolution of the state of Zaire before it turned into DRC, mainly from, pre-colonial, colonial, and then the Mobutu regime. Then came in the Kabila Senior, Kabila Junior, and the others. Really, the major problem, in addition to what has been said, the size of DRC, the absence of government in the Eastern DRC. Of course, that's the region inhabited by 133 militias, including M23. And then, of course, the politics in the neighborhood, the geopolitics of the region, and the wealth, immense wealth, which keeps attracting all sorts of players. I just want to focus on, I know Afande has said internal dialogue. I remember there were days of the inter-Congolese dialogue. But it also didn't deliver peace.
Sun City.
Yeah, it didn't deliver peace.
It did.
To some extent.
They moved some step.
Yeah, I know, but we are talking of the same country. The effect of war in the 30 years, and this is a country of about 100 million people, but you're talking of loss of about 10 million children in 30 years. This amount of damage on the future of a country, of course, with all the distortions created by war, rape, destruction of society. Congolese are always on the move. At times you wonder what crime they committed by finding themselves in that part of the country. Then the international players. We have the conflict entrepreneurs in DRC.
I like the term.
Yes. People invest in conflict, and they are the richest people. Like Mossad in Israel is the richest person. Unknown, yes. You're looking at the names I'm mentioning. I think we better mention names.
Yes.
Who lives a low-key life, because he's the richest man in Israel. A low-key life, no known public life, lives in a suburb in Tel Aviv, but is more popular in DRC, and has all sorts of concessions for the most precious minerals. If you look at the Creco commodity traders who were sanctioned under Magnitsky Act in 2017 by the US, just to give an example of how these conflict entrepreneurs operate, when the government of South Sudan was 4 weeks old, Creco commodity traders flew in with their private jet with $800,000 cash. Of course, they carried credit cards and the rest of it, travelers' checks, but they had $800,000 cash. And they had been tipped that the new government had no money. So when they reached there, you can know what they traded in on table. The concessions they look for, the concessions they get in DRC, how they've accumulated wealth, to the extent of attracting fines. By the UK court, a fine of 276 million for illegal trading, illegal and corrupt trading throughout Africa. These are the people who fly the jets and land in the middle of the forests in DRC. Eastern DRC does not have roads, but the highest volume of private jets flying in and out.
It has over 100 aerodromes.
Yes, so that is part of the conflict. We are talking of 133 militias in Eastern DRC, but only 1 or 2 are interested in fighting. Because other than the ethnic conflict of Lendo, Hema in Ituri, and then M23, the rest are just militias for grabbing and trading in minerals. They are not bothered with what is going on. That's why we don't hear of them. So you have people who capture territory and start trading. That absence of government keeps attracting revenues. That's how the conflict entrepreneurs also benefit, because they need to pick these minerals and hand over. Whom are they trading with? You have jets flying in a territory with the rest control of government. Who are they trading with? Militias. And how can this conflict end? When all these entrepreneurs are interested in grabbing. So you have the people with the guns. So you have the competition of guns, money, also coming into the ethnic controversies in DRC. Some of these jets carry guns and money. You give a militia guns to protect its territory. Because what makes a militia a militia? How do they acquire guns? They are armed. So we need to control movement of, if you want a stable DRC, movement of guns. You need to control the trade. Most of these conflict entrepreneurs are the best friends of the president. Kabila Senior, Kabila Junior, with the huge concessions.
Why don't you mention names?
But I'm mentioning
Of
the traders. So but I've mentioned. Why are you saying you dare me? I've mentioned Mossad. He had the biggest concessions right from 1995.
There are others you are not mentioning.
Yes. Why are you saying I'm not mentioning? I have some of the names, you know.
Gessler.
Yes, Gethra. Concessions of diamond, copper, and cobalt.
He was sanctioned.
Yes. But how long did he apply? And these are the most cherished guests of the presidents of DRC. So you have weak political leadership, you have ethnic controversies, you have trading in minerals, and proliferation of arms at the center of this conflict. And unless you check these four elements, then you cannot have a stable DRC.
Dr. Sarah, just a follow-up question before I come to Council Edgar. Could this escalate into a regional conflict? When you look at it and look at the finger pointing, the accusations that are there, and seemingly that the EAC is quiet on how this is transacting. And how would it play out as a regional conflict?
Well, previously we have had the DRC swallowing in everyone, so it wouldn't be new. The fighting after the Chisangan clashes literally swallowed in the East African community and SADC into that country.
It's called Africa's World War.
Yes. So today, even as the East African community withdrew, the peacekeeping force, SADC has been, but in a scanty manner, moving in. Angola, Tanzania, South
Malawi.
Africa. Yes. So SADC is supposed to move in with the peacekeeping force.
Peacekeeping? No.
I don't know whether it's peacekeeping or peace
No, it's
distortion.
Its mandate is combat.
The mandate is combat.
They are actually combating M23.
And South Africa lost two.
Combating
insurgents.
M23 or fighting with the DRC forces against M23?
Yes.
Supporting DRC forces
Against
against
M23.
M23.
Well, this is the situation. FARDC is using aerial bombing. And FARDC is not very good at trench warfare. So
SADC.
SADC, and particularly South African National Defense Forces, are giving support to the people it doesn't like, Wazalendo. And like I said,
Spare me.
I will, big brother. There are certain things that are happening behind the scenes that are not seen and are influencing events in that part of the world. But
Yeah, so SADC is supposed to have replaced the EAC force, but the reports on its movements are scanty, as you can see. And I don't know why there is a conspiracy of silence. this time around. When the conflict is at its height, why is the media silent? Why are the neighbors silent? Why is the East African community silent? Yet they knew their adopted child had conflicts.
Of course, you know that the East African community had to be silent when the mandate of the ESC force actually expired and there was no renewal. It was actually declared.
But there are treaty obligations. The treaty obligations go
8
beyond
days
the
which
force.
expired.
No, Honorable, the treaty obligations of East African community go beyond peacekeeping.
Well, the East African Community Treaty creates cooperation areas, but because it is based on limbs of cooperation, there are certain limbs we have not yet reached. Particularly now, material to do with the combat. Once, because every state forming the East African Community is still sovereign.
Yeah.
And now, to that extent then, once a state takes a decision against anything, the best you can do as an East African community is to wait on and keep persuading it to retract and backtrack on such decisions.
The diplomacy I was telling you about,
Yes.
Timothy,
Yeah, so
and the fickleness of diplomacy.
Dr. Sarah, are you done? I'd like to move to Edgar.
Yes, as I conclude, I call out East African community. They admitted DLC, knowing it had challenges. Their silence is highly suspicious. And even withdrawing a peacekeeping force alone does not take away the obligations of the East African community. I know that its leadership really is also has challenges, the leadership of South Sudan, at the time when we have conflicts. So you have a leadership that really is also doesn't have a firm grounding, but the members of East African community, the summit, the interministerial committee, they should come out and be on record on what is happening
What
in
is
DRC.
wrong with South Sudan?
Yeah, but what is the South Sudan? I would share information as chairperson of Vista and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. We have elections in South Sudan in December, but up to now, none of the conditions for elections take place has been met. No census, no registration, political parties are not registered,
but
no constitutional reforms. I'm saying that the leadership of East African community has also a basket of problems in their national.
Is it because the chairperson of East African community is General Salva Kiir? Is that what you're saying?
Sudan has enough challenges at the national level. I doubt that they can go beyond their borders. That's what I'm saying.
I'm disagreeing with that. Diplomacy is not so much about how you're constructing the state and what have you. General Salva Kiir was mediator in the Sudan conflict, you shall recall, under IGAD. Actually, the first attempt to bring Dagalo and General Burhan was undertaken by Salva Kiir. Salva Kiir, and it's simple to find the reasons why. There's SPLM North, and they were part of the bigger SPLM. And Salva Kiir was, at the time they went to start the SPLM in 1983, Salva Kiir was the captain in the Sudanese armed forces.
I'm not discounting. Mr. Moderator, Edgar will comment in his time.
Yes. No, but
Mr. Moderator, we are talking of a chairperson of East African community. Many people watching this show remember how Salva Kiir even failed to mention the names of presidents as he assumed the chairmanship of East African community. I am saying that the leadership, the current leadership of South Sudan, I'm not a diplomat. For all intents and purposes, I am not a diplomat. I'm saying really that the leadership of current leadership of East African community is challenged at several levels.
Okay. General, you had something before I get back to Edgar.
I wanted to really inform my sister here that if a host country to a peacekeeping force says go, principles of peacekeeping operations demand that you actually pack your bags and you go.
I have no problem with that, Afande. My question is, with or without a peacekeeping force, DRC is a member state of the East African community.
Okay. But have you looked at the mandate of a summit chair, really, in the East African community? It is not as diverse as we may think. This is a person chairing presidents of sovereign countries. And majorly, all you are working on are those established procedures and processes that are ongoing. In any case, he would not do much even if we wanted him to be a professor, young, he can be able to read and write, but that wouldn't be really something that would be material.
For me, it has more to do with the platform.
Yes,
I
it's
think,
just a platform.
I know this is my biggest, the biggest challenge we have with the intelligentsia or elite. They construct things in a certain way, and they believe, like I've said, the events turn on information that is not available to the public.
Yeah.
At one point, General Burhan and Lieutenant Colonel Abiy Ahmed nearly went to war over Al-Fashag. You remember some 16, you know, the contest between the Tigray and the Amhara forces. So some of the people crossed into Al-Fashag, which is a contested territory between Sudan and Ethiopia. Emperor Menelik didn't delimit the boundaries.
Okay, Edgar,
I'm giving background to some of these things. They are very critical.
They're critical, but I want to come back to you and Honorable Mbide.
Yes.
You seem to be very cagey on how the information is here. So let me come to you.
We are discussing a very sensitive issue.
Very sensitive,
yes,
but can implode the whole region.
Yeah. And I'm disagreed with that. And I'll give background to it.
And this, let me quote some of the things you have said. You have gone on to say there's some information that is not coming to the public.
Yes.
And there are some that are within the diplomatic channels.
Yes.
You're not mentioning what the intentions are, especially of SADC and all the forces behind there. You have also gone on to talk about, you know, the economics and all these things. Yes, we agree with that. But what's the interest of SADC in this? When you look at, you have spoken about hate speech in this. Statements from President Kagame, statements by President Tshisekedi on his day of inauguration. President Kagame making a statement to his parliament and saying the burden of DRC shouldn't be the burden of Rwanda, and saying if anyone comes for Rwanda, he will step out. So, really, why don't you put this rubber to the test of the road and tell us this conflict, how bad is it? The reality on ground.
One, as to whether it spills over to other countries, will really depend so much on the leadership, and particularly, many people don't like us to say this, but it's what it is. Will depend so much on the leadership of the president of the country where we're seated right now. Many things tend to gravitate towards him. But let me first explain myself on a certain issue. And indeed and
actually, I've remembered something you told Dr. Sarah, and you went on to say, it's slipping my mind, where you talked about the elite.
And I want to give one information, Mr. Moderator. Let me just give it now. The mission of the East African community is to widen and deepen economic, political, social, and cultural integration. So we cannot run away from the political questions and think that it is a framing of the intelligentsia.
Follows the fourth and almost last limb of integration.
Yeah, but there are political issues of the day.
Yes, Madam Sarah, we have not even had a protocol to that effect, not even a discussion to the effect of establishing a federation. And that is where the politics now would be handled with material robustness. But where we are now,
federation is still an academic issue.
Is still
between Dr. Suruma and Professor Turiamu.
Yes,
the papers that they produce.
Yes, so we can't get there as yet.
Dr. Sally is laughing.
Edgar, I saw the smirk on your face even when General was speaking and Professor was speaking and Dr. Sarah. But you said that the elite, because of the vacuum that is there, they tend to make up the stories, for lack of a better
That's
word.
right.
Actually, we call
But
them
then why are you
mere-
leaving the vacuum and not giving the information to the public
in proper,
so that they can be
proper
able to
English, we call
substantiate
them
what you
mere
say?
teradiddles, telling very little lies.
Honorable Midday.
No, it's called sophistry sometimes.
Aha,
Sophistry.
sophistry or teradiddles.
Edgar, let's get to the nitty-gritties of this thing, because you are really walking on eggshells and tiptoeing around this thing. Yet it could consume all of us. You've talked about $4,000, a dollar going up to 4,000.
Yes, yes.
All of us here would be affected.
We are affected. I mean,
We are
the
affected.
price
The
of
pound
fuel,
is going
the
to
price of fuel is
5,000.
certainly
Thank you
going
very
to go
much.
high.
So why are you not being real on what is happening and the interests and intentions of SADC, the West, Burundi, and all this purporting of narratives and pointing of fingers?
Now, and you see, for me, the critical point, that's why I'm disagreeing with my big brother, General Kuraige. You know, it's like in the field of medicine. My parents are watching, so I have to be very careful the examples I give. There's a branch of medicine called OBS and gynecology, obstetrics and gynecology. OBS is about, you know, pregnancy and the delivery of children. Gynecology is about reproductive organs of a woman. And I'm using it in the traditional form, not
Yes.
these other transgender and what have you. So you can have a sickness that originates from the reproductive organs of a woman. But then it affects the what? The obstetrics of the what? Of the woman. Now, we are both agreed with the General Kuraige that the underlying problem is economic. But for him, he goes ahead to add that as well as identity. I'm disagreed on that. He's giving, in my opinion, a wrong prognosis. We are both agreed on the good diagnosis, but the prognosis is what? Is different. So, you said I'm walking on eggshells, but I'll try to be as
Blunt.
I can't be as blunt. I'll try to be as forthright as possible. Now, all these ethnicities that are diverse and sometimes diametrically opposed to another are in the main part divided over ethnicity, or rather over resources. The Kinyarwanda-speaking people in that part of the country, there are those who are natives, those who were born there and have been part of the country that came to be known as the Congo Free State. Then there are those who went as economic immigrants to go and work on the rubber plantations, to go and work on the coffee, and also to go and work in the mines. Then there are those Kinyarwanda-speaking people who went as refugees in 1959, and a more problematic group of 1994. Now, the arrival of these other people created tensions beyond what they had been accustomed to. And unfortunately, for some of these militia groups, many of them have turned out to be mercenaries and soldiers of fortune at the service of regional and international
As
interests.
fortune hunters or what?
Pardon?
As fortune hunters?
No. Soldiers of fortune. The fortune
Okay.
hunters are the ones who come from outside the area. And they put themselves at the service of these people. When it comes to what Honorable Mbidi was talking about, the denial of citizenship and the hate speech that is emanating from that. Now, in that part of the country, titles, the lands that they have there were not titled. Land was given to persons by tribal, sub-tribal, and clan chiefs. Now, if you're indigenous to the DRC, then you have what they call tenure and ownership, right of tenure and ownership of land in that part of the country. Now, unfortunately for these persons in that area, the Kinyarwanda-speaking people who went as immigrants, I'm now not talking of natives, immigrants in the rubber plantations and in the mines, were able to earn and have some disposable income and applied for land ownership. And when we talk of land ownership in that part of the world, Mr. Nyangweso, it's not the small lands you have on the lake shore of Busia, lake shore of Lake Victoria and Busia that you have. We are talking of hundreds, 100 square kilometers owned by an individual. And these were titled. Why? Because they had the money. Now, that caused a lot of tension, especially among these other ethnic groupings that we rarely hear about, but are part and parcel of this conflict. Then, the conflict is mainly economic. So these other tensions that you see, that are ethnic in nature, have a background in that. So unless and until we deal with that aspect, believe me, we won't be making any headway. Two, you remember the AFRICOM? There was a report that leaked from the CIA. I think, was it 2014? A mapping, they had done a mapping of this whole region.
2012.
And their prediction, 2012, and their prediction was that the whole region would be in turmoil by 2020. It started with Sudan blowing up, followed by Burundi. Remember, we had many discussions that time with Major Okwiri. You remember those discussions we were having? And the mapping was that by 2020, the whole region would be. But as it were, it's a little delayed. 2024, what are we having in the region? We have Ethiopia has been at war, South Sudan, Chad, Central African Republic, DRC, Burundi, of course, we have skirmishes from this and the other side. So let me put it very clearly. We Africans are the authors of our own misery. We have put ourselves at the service of our detractors. And we have read, like she was talking of conflict entrepreneurs. Conflict entrepreneurs do mappings. They do mappings and cause collisions between you and spread disinformation. And this is what is precisely happening. Now, I don't want to talk about the names you have mentioned, the heads of state, and particularly for a person like me, General Kulaige. You know, I've been a part of misuse involving some of these heads of state, and I wouldn't like to escalate the situation beyond that.
Okay, I'm going to ask that I take a quick break. I come back to Honorable Mbide, but let me read some of these messages before we go. One going to General Kulaige there. Timothy, thank you. I have a question that should be asked to General Kulaige. What accounts for the UPDF's two-faced with active rebel groups in the eastern DRC, bare knuckles with the ADF in upper North Kivu, and woolen gloves with M23 in northern Kivu? Okay? I hope General has got that one. Good evening, Timothy. As long as DRC government does not look into solving identity questions, take cross-border people and non-citizens like the M23 question, military means will not solve it. For as long as DRC government favors and gives investors like Dan Hitler at the expense, minerals at the expense of its citizens, this will continue to happen, and militias like FDLR, Wazalendo, Mai against her citizens. This is Higuma Ivan there. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking more of this, but also the spectrum of solutions. This and more after this break.
Fred!
Osmosis.
Freddy! Fred Dollar, my boss, CEO Inojo, the general of generals, the conqueror of conquerors, the first and the final, the sky above the skies, the promised land, the terms and the conditions, the international king crocodile, the source of the Nile.
I don't have money today.
Just take a polite loan of 200k to stock my shop. The signs and symptoms of success. The bank commander, not the banker teller.
Why hassle for a loan when you've got MTN Momo? We're sorting it. Use the Momo app or dial *165*5# for all quick loans. Choose from the different loan options from our partners and get one that works for you. Together, we're unstoppable.
The government of Uganda and the Uganda Bureau of Statistics is calling upon all stakeholders such as the chief administrative officers, city mayors, resident city commissioners, city clerks, city and division councillors, wards and LC chairpersons, as well as the residents and business communities to cooperate with the UBOS field teams as we embark on advanced preparations to conduct the National Population and Housing Census on the 10th of May 2024. The census will be a 10-day exercise to obtain statistical data and information that will be used for planning and policy formulation, including information on 1. How many we are, 2. Where we are, 3. How we are living, 4. What we own, and 5. Where we access services from. The Uganda Bureau of Statistics has now started listing of households and mapping in the 11 cities of Arua, Fopoto, Gulu, Hoima, Jinja, Lira, Mbale, Masaka, Mbarara, Soroti, and in the Greater Kampala comprising of Kampala, Wakiso, and Mukono districts. For more information, please call 0755 342 128 or 0773 342 128. This message is brought to you by the Executive Director and Census Commissioner, Uganda Bureau of Statistics. Census 2024. It matters to be counted.
Nyati Motion Pictures brings you Tuko Pamoja, a documentary film about our unity as Ugandans and Africans.
Bunyoro would have simply created an East African community that we are looking for today.
The rulers of Bunyoro are actually Luos.
We people who live across the Nile, we are so related from our myth or from just the Nile.
We are the same people, and genetically we are even the same people.
We are similar people.
We are one.
Pamoja, we are one.
Use that word, pamoja.
Premiering every week from 3rd February to June 2024 at the National Theatre and Indere Center. Daily screenings are from 4th February to June 2024 at Ham Cinemax and the National Theatre. To get a ticket, call 0778 787 660. Tuko pamoja?
Ebisera by'okuzzaayo abaana mu masomero tebiteekwa kukaluubiriza n'akatono. Eno okusimba nnyiriri mpanvu kano kalipagano ka bidduka. Simanyi kuzunga na banka siripisi? Kati osobola okusasula school fees z'omwana wo ate n'okola n'ebirala ntoko ku ssimu ye ey'omu ngalo. Ekikola kyangu nnyo. Ngawunyizi *895*8 ogoberera ebikulagiriddwa oba okozese app ya MTN Momo. Ate kati okola ki olwaleero? MTN Mobile Money Uganda Limited erungamizibwa banka enkulu ya Uganda.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyango, so I'm joined by Professor Sarah, Honorable Mukasambide, Counsel Edgar Tabaro, Dr. Sarah Birete, and General Felix Kulaije. We're discussing everything fragile DRC and could it escalate to see what happens in the region there. A lot of feedback coming through, but let me read some of it coming as I get to Honorable Mbide. There was a question that from Honorable Mbide, I will have General Kulaije respond to it, which was, please ask General Kulaije, what accounts for the UPDF's two-faced with activities of rebel groups in the eastern DRC? Two-faced. Two-faced. What makes what makes the UPDF two-faced? Bare knuckles with the ADF in Upper Kivu, woolen gloves with M23 in Lower Kivu. You will respond to that. Honorable Mbide, before I come to you, let me read this one. This one will stay with Edgar, which says, also ask Edgar, And he gives a very lengthy text here, but let me read the last part. How else can the Congo and Rwanda states rethink the citizenship in today's dispensation? I think he's talking about the ethnicity of the people of Rwandan that are there.
Let me just give a quick retort. I am ethnically in Rwanda from Kisoro district. We call ourselves Bafumbira, but we are of the Kinyarwanda speaking group. We asserted our citizenship without shooting anybody. It was through a member of the Constituent Assembly, it was through the Constituent Assembly, and the major advocate was the Honorable Dr. Philemon Mateche, now happily retired in Kisoro. We never used any guns. You remember that debate? You had just
because you were not resisted. You see,
you were not resisted.
You were not resisted by way of guns. And I can tell you, of course, action and reaction are equal and majorly opposite. Uganda had provided an opportunity for all the citizens to definitely write a constitution of aspirations on how they would want to be led. Of course, the background of the gun included the 1980 war, 80-86 war, which had created the basis for further peace.
Total defeat.
Total defeat of who? Because clearly the persons that were ejected from leadership had chosen to make sure all Banyarwanda are non-Ugandans, and accordingly they would go. So that is, of course, saw a lot of participation of the Banyarwanda in the liberation war. They participated. Those that were non-Ugandan went. Those that were Ugandan clearly
even
stayed.
Ugandans went as well.
I can tell you.
Weren't you one of the people who crossed into the
yeah, but that was now, but we had agreed we are not saying. So, but what we are saying, and colleagues need to see this. Of course, even now we are beginning to look at a few things, because when they enacted the Constitution, there was again the threshold of 1926, which now creates a problem that almost 11 million Ugandans will be stateless by around August next year, after the review of after the renewal of national IDs. Why? Because the provision of people that were members of ethnic groups, of indigenous groups, by 1936 means even if you came in 1920, coming and membership are completely different. So and in 1926 we didn't have Uganda. We are not talking about protectorate citizens. We are talking about citizenship. And citizenship is for sovereign states. It is legal, and you cannot tag it to ethnicity, because ethnicity is extraterritorial. You will get lost when you tag citizenship to ethnicity.
And you're aware, you know as well as I do,
yes,
that the same issues are in Tanzania right now.
Yes. Even Nyerere talked about them.
This Balaro you see in Acholi. 90% of them are Kinyarwanda speaking from Tanzania.
So ethnicity, and we are happy that obviously the country is giving us a listening ear, because I'm the legal advisor for these people.
Which people?
But Banyarwanda, Ugandan Banyarwanda, because they also have a dichotomy of two. There are these ones that are border-related Banyarwanda, but there are those that are actually.
Uganda found us where we are. We didn't come to Uganda.
That is what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying. But there are those.
It's you guys who.
And Edgar is right. And that is the first limb of Banyarwanda. But there is a limb of Banyarwanda. Those that came here for several intents and purposes. And by the enactment of the 1962 Constitution, they were citizens. So you cannot turn around and say that those who were citizens by birth then are not citizens by birth now. Because we have enacted the Constitution or laws, and this is what is causing.
You see, the issue is actually cross-cutting in East Africa.
Yeah, extremely.
By the way, there are even Banyarwanda in Burundi.
Yes.
Let Nkurunziza. He's Kirundi. Was closer to Kinyarwanda than it was to Kirundi.
So now we are talking. Let's
look at this DRC.
Yes. Now let's look at DRC.
When we look at the international pressure that is coming in,
you first wait, because the ethnicity in DRC.
Let's come to the ethnicity a bit later.
You know why I would like to address
because if we address ethnicity, it is going to be the only thing we address today.
Okay, I'll find a way
So
to address it.
we're going to address it later.
I'm a lawyer, don't forget.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbite.
Yes.
The pressure coming in from the US, the pressure coming in from the EU, currently France, to Rwanda to stop supporting M23. How will Rwanda respond to this?
Why would Rwanda support M23?
Honorable Mbite,
One person once asked a question, and I think he has not received an answer yet. Because when you are talking about the militias in Congo DRC, it is not only and majorly M23. We have got the FDLR, the Interahamwe that orchestrated the killings of ethnic Tutsi in Rwanda, and actually ran away. And there are also reports that intermittently the same were being used as mercenary forces by the Kabila government. So these people are there preparing to also go back and execute havoc. So I am telling you that when you talk about one country, because what is happening in Congo, every country must have its own armies on the borders. Otherwise, the spillovers most likely will definitely lead to absolute annihilation of persons. This is what I am talking about, my brother.
Yes.
Except if we want, of course, to gloss over this issue. But let's talk about Congo, DRC. What happened in 1981? An enactment that made sure that actually a commission is established to look into who are non-citizens. At the same period of time, an approved provision in parliament that declared Banyarwanda non-citizens. Then what happened in 1993? A whole governor, Kalumbe, declared that the Honde and they should kill Banyarwanda for being non-citizens. So it started long ago.
Rwandan Defense Forces soldiers were got in DRC. One confessed at a 22-year-old was arrested with 63 others in there. That's one. Two, a UN report that really showed satellite pictures of M23 soldiers with military fatigue from Rwanda and weaponry that is sophisticated from Rwanda. The question is, if all these statements and allegations are seemingly true, how is Rwanda going to respond to these accusations?
By the way, you have not also spoken about aircrafts that have landed in Rwanda. Fighter aircrafts that have landed in Rwanda but allowed to fly out from Congo. Let me tell you, we are dealing with an extremely I would find it very difficult to explain what is happening in Congo DRC. What the president needs to tell us is that when he began to speak, particularly during campaigns, President Tshisekedi, when he tells people that some sections of persons should be armed to kill other sections of persons in the same country, who does he expect to protect those persons that are the subject of killing in the same country? So, my brother, it is not going to be about the UN. And for me, I think I shudder when I hear the UN and the European Union, who are the penny holders. They are the persons actually fermenting havoc for them for economic reasons. They have made sure nobody can lead the Congo if your intents and purposes are to, one, raise a substantive, robust army. Number two, if you want to establish mechanisms that can make sure you are in leadership and your tentacles have a cross-sectional command structure into the length and width of the Congo DRC, because then you will start now establishing PPDA rules that will make sure they can no longer trade as much as they want by simply flying in and flying out. I am telling you, they are failing. When you see a whole governor of Kivu, for example, declaring that a certain tribes, for example, the should kill ethnic Banyarwanda Congolese for being non-citizens.
That was
1993. So if you have, and because that is why I am telling you that this has nothing to do with, for example, the current government in Rwanda. 1993, they were not leaders in Rwanda. So if killing started then they can't be the ones doing it. So I am telling you, we are moving a narrow path in the mountains, and this is why I'm telling my sister here, the East African community is being very careful. Do you know that the contribution to the forces of the ESC had very clear discussions? Discussions became extremely you know, they became extremely problematic in such a way that the receiving country, the recipient, the host country, was very insistent on which country should not make contributions.
But those are the international rules governing peacekeeping, UN Charter.
Which rules?
UN Charter Article 50, you are a guest of the country in need of peace.
Yes.
If they have a problem with you,
no, I am talking about the East African community, Madam Sarah. When the East African community takes a decision to provide forces, peacekeeping forces, but the host country chooses that among us, the East African community states, one state should not make a contribution.
Because
that's what I'm saying.
Principles of impartiality. And
that now amounts to a judgment. We must say that.
Let me bring one aspect to the fore. Yes. Let me bring one aspect to the fore. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yes.
Some of these meetings were held in Nairobi, but most of the meetings, Nairobi was the political process, the conclave, chaired by Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes.
But when it came to the men with those peeps, the discussions were held in Arusha. Now, there's that one country that consistently sent low, what do you call it? There's a high-powered delegation and
low level.
Low level. At Nairobi, they would send even a junior, not even a minister for foreign affairs.
Yes, but
that country in Arusha.
Okay, but with the full powers and completely.
Yes, but you see,
and Council Edgar.
But that country did not
allow me bring in Professor Sarah.
That country did not contribute.
Gentlemen.
I don't know which country
I'm
it is.
not mentioning.
Probably I would tell you.
I'm not mentioning. But then that country has now deployed under SADC.
Okay, let me bring in Professor
Timothy, these are the things that are not said.
Those observations are critical.
Very critical. There are things that we are saying, but by not saying.
And that's the problem, because you're not saying anything.
No, but I've mentioned one country that consistently
they allowed silence.
Absented itself from this process. Okay. And that's where you should be looking.
Allow me to bring in Professor. Professor, a lot of undertones, especially with these two gentlemen there, what they are not saying and what they're silently saying. Is peace possible in DRC?
I love the words.
Actually, what the gentlemen are dealing with is their silences and around.
They are very loud.
It's very loud.
Yeah.
So it's louder than if you had said something. But we shall respect your right not to say
No, we are leaders and we just can't talk carelessly.
We must be contributing to the solution.
We can't talk carelessly.
And gentlemen, I'm going to come back to you on the ethnicity, especially Honorable Mbide and Edgar, because it cuts across and there's been notions even here in the country, how this can be resolved, especially in the naming.
Yes.
But Professor, is peace possible in DRC and how?
I think you need to understand what the problem is.
We have seen ethnicity and economics.
You've tried very much to silence the issue of ethnicity, but I think what we need to know is that ethnicity is not inert there. Ethnicity is a construction. Okay? If you read the book by Frank Wilmer on the social construction of man, the state, and war, what he argues is that ethnic identities are socially constructed. And so people have interests. These interests drive them to certain actions, including war. And in that process, they define who belongs and who should not belong. And that's why people are saying some people lived in Kivu and in Ngoma for hundreds of years, and now today we are turning around and we are saying they are not. Because those people were there. But because of the current political dispensation, it suits certain leaders to define those people as non-citizens, as non-belonging. So identity is a construction and it goes on and on and on. But then, of course, you've asked, is peace possible? And another writer who talks about the word that doesn't say its name, that is Jason Stans, who really focuses on the DRC. And his book is largely around the failure.
Dancing in the Glory of Monsters is the book he authored.
Yeah, but also the word that doesn't say its name.
Oh, the latest book, yes.
Yes, and it is about the failure of the 2003 peacekeeping mission, which consumed tens of billions of dollars. It was a UN mission, but it has failed to settle the DRC. And of course, he identifies a number of things. One are the military bourgeoisies. Someone called them military entrepreneurs, but there's a new economic class of military bourgeoisies and also of politicians who survive off this war, okay? And as long as those people are surviving and their livelihoods are secured by war, they are not interested in peace. But then he also goes ahead to talk about the apathy of the local population, they have resigned to fate. But also the apathy of the international community. The international community feels so tired. I mean, they've talked about DRC since the 60s, and it's not about to end. And what actually he says, if we are to build peace, we all have to be concerned and consulted. We have to build new interest in the DRC. But of course, my concern is what will this kind of interest be? Because we've seen whoever develops interest in the DRC ends up exploiting the DRC. So you indeed need peace to be built. And one of the things is what maybe Uganda government had tried, opening up the place, make the place. I mean, as long as there are jungles, you know, Colonel Kureje told us, General, sorry, I really apologize. That's why we stay in Afande Lane, because they are covered.
It's easier to,
he talked about moving and then bumping onto airfields. Maybe if we had had time, he would say you move and then you bump onto certain militias. So if that place can be opened up, that will help a bit, okay? Largely, we are seeing a lot of conflict and redefining who belongs and who doesn't belong, which we are saying identity, because the place is underdeveloped, okay? So if we can have, of course, we are talking about peace. Peace will have to come from those who are closest and are affected by the DRC conflict. Currently, Uganda's refugee population, our second biggest refugee population, are DRC people. So we are already affected because we have to provide humanitarian. And you know Uganda's humanitarian response, some are in camps, some are free to be in cities, and the state has to look after them. So that is one. But then also the other thing is, you cannot afford to ignore this war. Someone, when we were here from Nigeria, sent in and made a contribution to me that when Boko Haram started in Nigeria, everyone thought it was a Nigerian issue. Now they are in the Lake Chad basin, and they don't know where they will go. So suddenly the area is beginning to see that this is a problem. So it is our problem. We already have the humanitarian, the refugees here, but other people talked about trade, those who understand it better. But one way to build peace would be development. Another way to build peace is what Uganda had started, opening up that space, creating communication, enabling movement, and then with the time, once you have development, some of the things like identity crisis, who should share the little we have, or do you have a small pie and we redefine who shares, or do we create a bigger pie and everyone has access to a slice?
And I like what you said about a pie. Dr. Sarah mentioned Sudan, South Sudan. The cessation of this country, splitting it into two. Could this be a solution?
But a solution how? Because you see, people here talked about so many hundreds of militias, and they are not in one place.
I hope DRC citizens are not watching this show.
It is not in one place. So they are all over. These skirmishes in the DRCs keep exploding in different places. So what are you going to divide? You know, with the Congo, I mean with the Sudan, the fighting had taken racial lines since the 70s. So it was possible for those who were
and religious as well.
Racial and religious. But so it was possible for those who were concerned, IGAD, the neighbors, East African community, Uganda, to clearly show where the demarcations were. And that's why the comprehensive peace agreement could come up with such a settlement. But now with DRC, what will the division be about? I think it's better keeping the country together, but working on the things that keep that country apart. But we should not forget that the real problem in the DRC are the people who are exploiting the DRC, and they are external to DRC. And they will not allow peace in the DRC. But as an East African community, as neighbors who are going to be affected by this conflict, we have to forge a way forward.
If you talk of division of the DRC, it's what the process.
Some of it I said, Uganda government had started developing and opening up that space. You need to develop that place. It needs development, it needs infrastructure, it needs opening up. And
opening up to the rest of the East African community.
Yes, and also the good thing is the African Union. If you look at the map of infrastructure development, particularly the road networks of the AU, they're having all these roads and they're all going through the continent. And the belief is that if the continent is opened up to trade with itself, some of these issues will be resolved. Right now, we all trade with the previous colonial power because that's what we have. And the cost of transport between us as a continent is very expensive. Okay. So if the AU can open up these very many, you have that coming from Conakry to I don't know where, so you can just look at that map. It's a very big infrastructure map.
There's one they are doing from Lobito, yes. Lobito port, north of... To Maputo. No, Lobito north of Luanda to Luanda as in Angola. Luanda. I'm not Portuguese. Luanda. From Lobito from the Atlantic Ocean to Lubumbashi. They are doing a dry port there.
Yeah.
Then Lubumbashi to Kolwezi.
Then
the
you have
border point.
Conakry to Benin.
Okay.
And it's being, listen, 1 second. It's being financed by the United States of America.
Okay.
We'll get to that one. General, there was a question for you
I'm
here.
speaking loudly in the silence.
General Kulaije, a question was put to you. Bare knuckles for ADF, gloves for M23, why?
Bare knuckles with ADF because ADF is a Ugandan problem. Okay? 2, it's a problem we are dealing with in a partnership with the host country. And therefore we are fighting alongside each other, FRDC and UPDF. No gloves for M23 because we are not dealing with them. Rather, we recognize that there is a problem in North Kivu that must be handled politically by the DRC as a country and the citizens. That M23 has been recognized before by government as bona fide citizens that have a cause.
There was an agreement that was signed.
And there was an agreement that was signed. So it's not about us.
No, even later. Even later there was an M23.
Yes. Gentlemen, let him finish.
So
Coming to you.
the one who is asking needs to be informed that we are not dealing with a foreign entity in DRC. ADF is a foreign entity in DRC from Uganda. Therefore, Uganda must deal with it in collaboration with the host country.
Through a bilateral arrangement.
It's a bilateral arrangement. Thank you very much. But M23 is an internal problem that must be dealt with politically with the support of the region. We have done it before. It can be done again.
And General, just a follow-up question.
And as I conclude on this matter, there is a history. We're involved in settling the Burundi conflict as Uganda. And very successfully so. Actually, one of the reasons why the Burundi followed us in Somalia, they said Uganda helped us, we must support them in helping Somalia. So we have a history that we go into a conflict minus biases. That's the critical area. Our role is supportive, not the answer giver. Many places where conflict resolution fails, the external actors come with solutions, ready-made answers. Predetermined resolutions.
But it was
with Uganda, we go with the supportive role.
General Kulaije, it was done here.
My follow-up question to you is...
I'm referring to the history of Uganda that
General, when
people in uniform tend to be...
When you look at the UN peacekeepers,
yes,
they are living in 3 phases. By the end of the year, they would have left the country. SADC, by the 15th of December this year, they would have left the country. Isn't that a concern for the UPDF, especially being that this is a country that borders us?
Timothy,
as support givers,
every Ugandan, leave alone UPDF, every Ugandan should be concerned. She talked about refugees, millions, displacements that are going on inside the DRC, the spillover effect onto Uganda, the exploitation of the government resources that are not even sufficient for only citizens, right? Then of course, the fragility of the area gives fertile ground for negative forces against Uganda to operate. 6, the economics. By the way, leave alone national level, locally, you have Ugandans who farm inside the DRC. I hope you are aware.
But from better farming in
you have Ugandans who do farming across the border. They are no longer going there because of that conflict. One of the issues causing food shortages in Kisoro is the conflict in DRC.
That's right. The bira is grown in the DRC.
Bira is Irish potatoes. So
yeah.
on a very serious note, this war is destabilizing the entire region. This war is bringing refugees that are not only displaced in their country, but they are putting a strain on the resources among the neighbors. 3, spread of diseases. You have areas that have not done immunization, that have not done all the basic primary health care activities, and the population is moving from that area inside an area that you have been immunizing children and expectant mothers. What do you expect?
Spread of disease,
Spread of
contagious
disease.
diseases.
Thank you very much, General.
Just a quick one. Just a quick one. When it comes to categorization of forces in the Eastern DRC, and I'm disagreeing with the position in Uganda, the negative forces. Uganda has chosen to say these are negative and these are not negative. Now, one of the forces you refer to as negative, in some of the reports I've been seeing, but of course you don't mention it in public, is Nyatura. Now, Nyatura was incorporated in the FARDC. In fact, its commander, Major Brigadier General Mugabo, is the division commander in Ubangi, this area near Ubangi, near Central African Republic.
Central Africa, yes.
Okay. Allow me bring in Dr. Sarah. Dr. Sarah, I saw the Minister of DRC, the Minister of Information, making a statement somewhere, and this video has taken round. And he was asked about M23. And he said he doesn't want to discuss M23, he wants to discuss Rwanda. He says M23 is a puppet of Rwanda. And he doesn't want to talk about M23 without addressing Rwanda. Is M23 a proxy of Rwanda, especially in this whole thing?
Well, M23 or March 23rd movement, the day they were formed, has a well-known foundation. Before they were resettled temporarily in Uganda.
Temporarily? 10 years is temporary?
Yeah, temporary because they've gone back. Yeah, so that's why I call it temporary.
Okay.
Yeah, so the process that led to the resettlement of M23 in Uganda for that period had accusations and counter-accusations as to who could be supporting M23. The UN reports then, with the satellite pictures captured still on the UN website, showed troop movement by both Uganda and Rwanda. Then the peace process that led to M23 to be resettled in Uganda and be disarmed. What remains unexplained is how the M23 left Uganda again to wage a war. What happened to that process? Where did it fail? How was M23 let free to go back? In the second resurfacing of M23, Uganda is not accused. Now Rwanda remains alone. Whereas the first phase, the two countries were being mentioned. In the second phase, we have only Uganda remaining with M23, Rwanda, sorry, and then Uganda is no more mentioned. Even when M23 left here, walking. How did they leave? That process I don't know.
There were two M23s.
No,
There's one group that came to Bihanga. There was
I've
another one in Iro.
Edgar, you will come in. There is a story captured of how parts of M23 that were in
Bihanga.
Yes, Bihanga, crossed back, captured by our media.
Yeah,
so whether it is M23, 1, 2, or 3, I'm not a security expert. So, but that process is documented. In the second phase of M23, you have Rwanda also sometimes making statements because the citizens, the contention, DRC thinks Banyarwanda who are in DRC, some school of thought should go back to Rwanda. The question of citizenship and ethnicity. Then you have efforts, because I think DRC troops twice have crossed peaceful, although Rwanda leaves them. There has been reports of DRC troops, they say they've come to Rwanda, they've gone back. They've come with the helicopters. Rwanda seems to be quiet. So you have these citizens being linked to Rwanda. There are reports of sophisticated equipment of M23 that is linked to Rwanda. you have all these questions remain unanswered because Rwanda keeps denying, at least publicly, that they are not involved. The people who manage our borders, border tracing, the people who manage our aerial space know the truth of what is happening. The governments of the region know the truth. The reason they keep this truth from citizens is best known to them. The reason there is a media, almost a media blackout of the current fighting in DRC remains also to be seen. And the reason the leadership is quiet also remains to be seen.
Timothy, can I answer her question of how M23 left?
Tell us.
Yes. And that's why the media captured them being taken back.
Yes.
Because it was formal.
It was a formal process.
After the signing of the agreement, of the process chaired by Honorable Crispus Chiyonga, it was agreed M23 would be reintegrated, into the National Army.
Was it given a time frame?
Well, I don't have the details, but that was the principle.
Okay.
And indeed, we facilitated the return of M23.
Together with the government of DRC?
Yes, in respect of that agreement.
Okay.
Immediately they reached back, they started fighting.
No, this is exactly what happened. They were integrated in FARDC.
Let me come. Honorable Bide, then I come to you. Yes.
Because there is I have seen people that have intermittently wanted to spill the Congolese problem into the whole East African region. The accusation that Rwanda supports M23, Dr. Sarah here told you that where did they go, for example, when the Standard Brigades dismissed them from Congo, DRC, in 2012? Did they go to Rwanda?
A group.
They ran here.
They ran here.
Yeah.
So, meaning, where did they go? Where did they leave from in order to go back?
Here.
Here.
So, when you have, and I think this we must be extremely very careful. Do you know that there are reports, and America has consistently denied, that America funds and supports M23? Those reports have also been there. And America has actually also denied by creating rejoinders that actually Kagame should stop supporting M23. So these are accusations and counter accusations, and we must not base on these in order to focus on the solution for the Congo. Afande here has been telling you, what is M23? Describe it beginning with the nomenclature itself. It was the signing of an agreement between the government and the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo on March 23rd. That ultimately was breached by government, and they again went for war. That is M23. So you cannot turn around. Yes.
From here, were they reintegrated or they left to fight?
No, here he will tell us. He will but I can tell you that the control a state can have on such people, for example, whose aspirations have not been met, is very limited. At most, you can declare them refugees, but within a period of time, all refugees can begin going home.
Well, this is the situation. This is the situation, huh?
So, no, I was still continuing. So this is something that we need. I would like all brothers and sisters here to definitely kowtow to this kind of reasoning. That first of all,
you're conscripting us.
First of all, let us now agree in limine that this is a problem between Congolese citizens. That is to begin with.
And can only be solved by?
We can help.
Congolese.
We can help.
Principally Congolese.
Yes, but we can help. We can only help. So, despite the languages they speak ethnically, you had also wanted to generate a question over what, for example, the nomenclature of an ethnic group should be. that if an ethnic group are called Banyarwanda, then there is a problem. Even rats are aware that when you change the name of a cat, it does not matter. They will still run away from it. So a name does not matter. It is the character of the cat to eat rats, not the name.
And I'm glad you,
so,
Honorable Mbidi, I'm glad you
Yes.
brought it up.
Yes.
One of your propagators has wanted to change it from Rwandans in this country to Bavandi.
I wouldn't want to address
no,
him.
you want to
because,
address it. You've gone there, so let's finish.
If you want, I've never gone there.
How does the identity of such
you know,
be
let me
resolved?
answer you. Let me answer you.
Timothy.
That is that kind of
Timothy.
debate. That kind of debate.
Edgar, let him finish.
That kind of debate of change of name of an ethnic group is quite anachronistic. That debate was concluded.
Was it concluded?
In the CA. when they named ethnic groups in Uganda, that was concluded. If you want to introduce a new ethnic group, that's a new debate. For me, I am not part of that debate.
I've heard of people trying to the Banyaruguru now asserting their identity.
Fine.
Some Yabugwe, the Bagwe are asserting their identity.
They want to Fine. pick up
Yes,
from
Bagwe.
their
Fine.
Bagwe. So for me as a lawyer,
Professor
as a lawyer,
let's have
Edgar.
Even Banyabutumbi.
Gentlemen,
yes. But
let's have
Edgar,
Honorable Mbidi finish.
as
I'll
a
come to
lawyer,
Edgar.
the rights of citizens include the rights of those citizens in the third schedule to the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, and they are called Banyarwanda. So the rest of those other people who want to be citizens by invention, they can also take care of any invented rights.
I like the word by invention.
Yes. So what we need to know, for me as an advocate of courts of judicature, clearly that is the avenue.
Now this is not the Honorable Bukasabide speaking. He's representing his clients.
No.
Yeah, he's forum shopping.
He's stating is a fact.
No, but I have a rejoinder.
I'm stating facts.
No, I have a rejoinder.
If, for example, person is claiming to be denied rights, that means those people have those rights, are entitled to them, but they are being denied. Now, you cannot begin to tell me that now, please, I am coming up with the new persons. Now, for me, the rights available to individuals are available to those Banyarwanda.
Honorable Mbidi, the change of, the suggestion of the change of name is not to change identity. It's to try to solve change the label that is one of the causes of the unrest within.
You know, it is like when women are also, when we are agitating for gender parity, gender rights, if you come up with a suggestion that no, let's start calling women something else. For me, it doesn't look like a solution.
It's defeatist. But let me just a quick one.
We must focus on them and their rights.
Honorable Mbidi,
and gender parity to that.
In that part of the world called the Kivus, the Kinyarwanda-speaking people there do not necessarily identify themselves as Banyarwanda. They identify themselves by the landmarks where they settled. In South Kivu,
I didn't bring out that in respect to Congo.
I'm going to
that one. I was speaking in respect.
And I'll come to what you're saying. Yes. So in South Kivu, they are mainly called Banyamulenge.
Yes,
when it comes to North Kivu, you hear them saying Ndumunyama Tsisi, Nyama Murushuru.
Why are they called Banyamulenge?
Yeah? Because of the hills.
Why are the hills named after Kinyarwanda names? So for me,
you are getting me wrong.
If you tell them to go back,
now when it comes
they
to
should
Uganda,
carry the hill, because really.
No, I've not said they should go back. You're misunderstanding me.
Edgar, you're
not you. I am telling you.
You're telling Kishasha.
Yes. When you tell
but you're pointing at me like
no. Sorry.
I know I'm as big as Congo. But that doesn't make me a Congolese.
Edgar,
I'm making reference to the cat and the rats.
Gentlemen. Edgar, please make your submission so that I bring in Professor Sai.
Okay, sure. Okay. Now, when it comes to the Republic of Uganda, and I think this is where the Honorable Mbidi's clients are losing it. When it comes to first of all, there's this confusion that the people from Banyarwanda are called Banyarwanda, the noun Banyarwanda, and that you have an ethnic grouping in Uganda called Banyarwanda. And so people wonder that how can you be a Banyarwanda and a Ugandan, which I think is, for lack of
the
better,
nationals are Rwandans.
Banyarwanda. No, you see, the noun. And I think that is really ignorance at its best.
Yeah, it is
We have Somalis who are indigenous to Kenya.
Yeah.
We have Somalis who are indigenous to
Somalia.
Somalia. We have Somalis who are indigenous to Ethiopia.
Yes.
We have Somalis who are indigenous to Djibouti.
Yes.
And they are all known as Somalis.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And there are those Somalis who are Somalians and there are Somalis who are Kenyans.
Yeah.
So I see no whatever. I think it's really ignorance. And it pains me when I hear elites.
It is bollocks. Yeah? If you have to give it now, then
Now we that it again.
But when it comes to the issue of citizenship of the Banyarwanda, you know, you can only be a citizen. There are only two ways you can be a citizen. One is by birth, two, naturalization. Now, if your parents belong to a community that was indigenous to Uganda as of 1926, you automatically
now
qualify.
that is where the problem
Now,
lies.
you see,
you must be a
That's
citizen
the Constitution.
in
This is the
accordance.
Constitution.
It is
It's the
individual.
Constitution.
Yeah,
Now
but
I'm
that's
coming to
what the
that.
Citizenship
I'm addressing
Constitution
this
says.
issue.
Individual.
Well, you see,
Not
if
parents, not what.
if your parents, if your parents came to
That is
Uganda,
the problem.
Let him conclude.
if your parents came to Uganda after
Please, you give me that one
1926,
because
if
I will
your
give it to
parents,
you after I've come to Professor
the
Sir.
problem is he has created a rejoinder on a matter that is
That you're
actually
passionate about.
I'm passionate about. I have instructions to defend.
You see,
and I can tell you.
he's forum
it is a
shopping
matter
now.
to do with race.
Okay.
Go to the Constitutional Court.
So if we allow him to
I'm going to come to you, Honorable Mbidi. Let me finish so that I come to Professor Sir. Yes.
But more importantly, you see, if your parents came to Uganda
those are parents.
as immigrants, you do not qualify to be a citizen unless you undergo the process of naturalization. Exactly, that is the law.
Why don't I?
Honorable Mbidi, your boss is Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs.
No.
Prepare him a brief and he'll amend the Constitution. We have
No, not at all. I think
Your rejoinder, then I come to Professor.
Okay, let me give my reply to his rejoinder actually. Now, I can tell you that there are two things you need to look at. Citizenship and ethnicity or nationality. Now, citizenship is legal. Ethnicity or nationality is sociological. Citizenship is addressed, it is the subject of municipal law, and it is related to only sovereign states. Ethnicity is extraterritorial, and it is the subject of international law.
Okay.
They are completely different.
Thank you.
Now, if you want to determine citizenship of an individual, first of all, it is an individual matter. Citizenship by birth.
Okay. Honorable,
Yes,
let's leave it there.
The principle of sui nolis.
Because I have run out of time.
If you are born in a country,
We have entered the classroom now.
Let's put a stick in it. Professor,
because my
because I've run out of time, I'll start with Professor, Honorable Mbide, Edgar, Dr. Sarah, and finally, General
It's
Felix
always a
Light.
pleasure being with these people here.
Your 2 minutes start now,
Yes,
Professor.
Thank you very much, Timothy and viewers. So we've had an interesting debate on Congo and Congo's problems. We've acknowledged that Congo's problems are historical, but they're also contemporary, and they keep changing with the times. Of course, I think one of the, I wouldn't be among the people who think the DRC should be split, because as a continent, there's a lot of decrying, of fragmenting these communities into smaller blocks as a way of doing trade or asserting sovereignty that Honorable was talking about. So I think since even Africa wants to unite, since we are saying that bigger blocks do better trade and fashion more development, I think it is high time everyone got interested. And by everyone, I mean East African community, which was really interested, but also things like African Union, to say what is happening in the DRC and how can the DRC be part of a bigger bloc. We are happy as part of East African community, but that process needs to be concluded properly as a way of resolving this perennial problem of the DRC. Because the more it continues the way it is, it will continue being exposed to exploitation, and so we shall see things like identity mobilized to defeat that. And by the way, as I said before, identity in itself is not a problem. If some people are born light, other people are born dark, other people are born with long noses, that's not a problem. It is when you begin making certain privileges and denials based on that.
On supremacism.
That we have a problem. If you begin saying light-skinned people or long-nosed people, dark people should not drink water, they should starve, then we have a problem. But if they are there and they're enjoying rights with everybody, then we don't have an identity crisis. So there's truly an identity crisis, and that identity crisis, beyond DRC, the African Union needs to pay attention so that we build a bigger, developed Africa, as opposed to small blocks where we spend time thinking about ethnicity. And I know those who seek to exploit us will want to keep us in the ethnicity lane, to try to make us think that our problem is because I don't like you and I don't like the other. But they are fashioning those. They and their agents keep mobilizing those differences and amplifying them instead of allowing people to unite. So let's all become interested. Thank you.
Honorable Mbide.
Yes. So conclusively, I was speaking about the principle of jus soli. Immigrants are citizens. When you go to the United States and you say that immigrants are non-citizens, they will chase you because all of them are immigrants. Actually, the natives are almost getting extinct, saved by an act of parliament that seeks to protect them. So what we want to mean and to tell these people is that citizenship does not expire if it is by birth. Citizens sit of a sovereign state, write a constitution, and the citizenship of 1962 continues to be citizenship. The citizenship in Congo of 1960 that continued in 1972, 1974 continues to be citizenship. And accordingly, rights accruing must be on equal footing. This degree, you know, where, for example, the state and leaders, successive leaders of DRC, getting happy at the sufferings of these people merely because they speak Nyarwanda, what we call the epicaricacy, where you develop happiness at the misfortunes of others. I think that one now is developing a substantive dislike for state, mistrust for state, to the extent that several garrisons are being created among us populations. They begin with a defensive mechanism, a defensive intent, and they become criminal. But they also now want to take state. Let me tell you, it is not wrong for me to think that actually secession would be a plausible decision to be taken.
Okay.
It does not matter. If you secede, because it appeared for purposes of South Sudan, but we know there are problems, but problems are now localized and they can be solved intermittently for all intents and purposes with the help of others. We have a region where they have got problems and they don't need help.
Thank you.
So they tell you, we don't want your help. Now, what do? Their populations, the government is saying, don't come. The population is saying, we are suffering, we are dying.
Thank you.
What do we do?
Allow me bring in Council Edgar.
Now, in DRC parlance, when you talk about secession or creating an enclave for Kinyarwanda-speaking people, the Rwandaphones in the DRC is termed as balkanization. Now, that's a topic that is very sensitive in the DRC. If and when you talk about it, you reignite the crisis of July the 10th, 1960, when Moise Tshombe declared a state in Katanga, countering Joseph Kasavubu and Patrice Lumumba. It's a very dangerous topic to raise in the DRC. Two, Kinyarwanda-speaking people are the minority, and I'm talking of Hutu and Tutsi, are the minority in Kivus in comparison to the other groups that occupy, that are native to that area. So the talk of creating or seceding is very unproductive and does not advance any of these interests. Two, or lastly, three, in 1989 or 90, I believe you attended that conference. It was just across the road. Then it called Kampala International Conference Center, KICC, which the director was FDR Agureme. You remember the Global Coalition for Africa? Professor Adebayo Adedeji, yes. And the patron, I think, was General Obasanjo. President Museveni echoed this. It was, I think the theme was Africa's, the global, the future for Africa. He recorded the same. I was young, very young. I just joined secondary school, and I was young and impressionable. Then later, when I joined university, I think when did Clinton come to Uganda? Undertake a state visit?
1998.
98.
Yes.
When at Sowera, in Mukono, Sowera Primary School, President Museveni emphasized these things. You remember him speaking? Actually, he was saying that English is a very narrow language, and he used some local words to explain what he wanted to pass on. So he said, African people are interrelated. African people are interconnected. African people are interdependent, and also emphasized the other aspects of access to markets, free enterprise, and integration.
Okay.
Now, those are very key to resolving the issues that in Congo. And when you're looking at the crisis or the turmoil in DRC, I don't think limiting it to the M23 will produce the results that we are looking at.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edgar. Dr. Sarah.
I think for me, the conflict should be looked at in totality. If you address one aspect and leave the other pending issues, then you will not achieve total peace in DRC. You have the political angle of the conflict with the absence of government, mainly in in the areas occupied by militia. Government needs to take total control of DRC territory. You have the question of ethnic tensions. You have a country with 250 plus ethnic groups. At one time, the Banyamulenge were excluded in the politics of the country. Yes. Yet they had occupied, positions like Bzima Karaha, who was a foreign minister under Laurent Kabila. Then the next day, you tell him that he's not a citizen of the country. So these controversies must be addressed. And the third issue is the networks, the conflict entrepreneurs. For me, there must be a targeted effort to disrupt the networks of people exploiting the minerals of DRC, so that the resources of DRC are exploited in a transparent and useful way that benefits the people. Whereas DRC is the most resource-rich nation in the world, the DRC people are the poorest. They are the wretched of the earth. How do we explain the two controversies? There must be a middle ground.
Thank you very much. Finally, General Kulaija.
Thank you very much, and I want to salute my colleagues for these wonderful contributions. For me, the starting point, we must support the DRC government to build the capacity.
Yeah. And take charge.
And take charge. So that you do not have areas with vacuum for the devil to take advantage. Two,
who is the devil?
Two, the devil is the one who was thrown out of heaven. Two, the DRC government has to accept that there are problems they have to deal with internally, acknowledging that there is a problem. Three, the external actors, especially the ones Dr. Sarah is talking about, the entrepreneurs, can only be deterred when there is a strong state that is in charge of their resources.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the question of ethnicity or identity cannot be ignored. But then you need to ask a question. The Abakongo across the bridge in Brazzaville, why is there no conflict?
There are no minerals.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There are allures across the border in DRC and allures in Uganda. Why is there no problem?
Thank you, General. Let me get just 4 messages. Good evening, Mr. Nyangweso. Thank you for gathering a very competent panel. M23 may not be so much an enigma, but we thank the Most High God that the elephants, bulls have met around the table. Let's pray that the peace between DRC and Rwanda and less intervention of our cousins. Mulindwa Rugumayo from Fort Poto, okay? Job from Namisindwa, that one sounded like Edgar.
No.
Job from
But I know
Namisindwa, thank you for the
Rugumayo.
period, for the show.
I'm also from Fort Poto, by the way.
Someone else goes on to say, thank General Kulaije for his reasoning there on M23 because of the troops, because our troops are still there, okay? The final one is, I want to thank Timothy. I want to thank you for returning Dr. Sarah, very open-minded on how she handles issues, and I'm really grateful. Okay, we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you very much, Professor Sarah, Honorable Mbide, we appreciate. Council Edgar, thank you very much. Dr. Sarah, as always, and General Felix Kulaije. From us to you, we'll end with this quote: war is only a cowardly escape from the problems of peace, by Thomas Mann. Good morning.
Good morning.